I'm Amy Atchley. Welcome back. Or if you are just now joining us, we would like to thank you again and thank all of you for coming on this virtual Cool House tour today. For all of you just now tuning in, we want to let you know that you will also receive a link to the recording of this event, along with other resources from today's presentation. Look for that follow-up email in a few days. We will also be sending you an invitation to our Green by Design workshop in August. This 3-evening online series will help you learn how to build, remodel, or buy green homes that improve energy and water efficiency, increase comfort, and reduce maintenance. Before we start the next video tour, let's take another quick poll. In the past 25 years, how many times have you attended the Cool House tour? Is this your first time? 1 through 5, 6 through 10, more than 10. We really want to appreciate you, tell you how much we appreciate you coming along with us on these tours. It's our 25th anniversary, and your participation is what keeps us going. We'd really like to take a moment and invite those who have attended 10 or more of the Cool House Tour events to put your name in the Q&A. We'd love to share some love with you here. So let's see if we have results from the poll yet. Okay, great. Thank you for your participation. Here we go. We have 42% first time. So thank you so much. It's really exciting. We're glad for you to come on this event for us virtually. It is our second virtual event. What we're so excited about is the opportunity to bring an event like this to more people with this virtual option, allowing you to join in from the comfort of your own back porch. Let's see, did we see anybody with the 10 years or more that we can give a little bit of love to? I'm looking in the Q&A, and we may revisit that. Okay, we are ready to get started for our first tour of the afternoon. It's of an alley office and retreat in East Austin. Let's watch the video.
In East Austin, these sustainability-minded homeowners decided to maximize their property's existing space and generate extra income by building a 2-story backyard dwelling off the alley at the rear of their lot. This urban hideaway includes a 1-bedroom apartment perfect for guests and short-term rental opportunities, complete with an office, storage, and a garage. The upstairs apartment's bright, airy interior maximizes natural light, while the porch doors to the living room and kitchen allow for free-flowing ventilation. Views over the neighborhood and towards downtown make the space feel connected to the community. Downstairs, a home office and workspace offer an easy, carbon-free commute. The garage doors can open into both the alley and the yard, creating an instant venue for outdoor entertaining. LED lighting and Energy Star appliances allow this living space to use very little energy. And Austin's Energy Solar Rebate Program enabled the owners to install a 4.1 kilowatt solar array to produce clean, renewable electricity on site. The homeowners take recycling and reuse seriously, having collected materials from renovation projects at homes, schools, and even the state capitol to create a range of furnishings and finishes. This attractive, environmentally friendly unit shows how Austinites can sustainably maximize their lot's space and make responsible decisions that improve efficiency at every step of the building, design, and decorating process, enabling them to enjoy their property for years to come.
Beautiful video. Wow. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I did want to say we have one individual who has attended 10 or more Cool House tours. I'm going to give him a shout out to Justin McLemore. Thank you, Justin. Thank you so much. And so now what we'd like to do is introduce you to the folks providing the next presentation. Joining us to talk more about the design and building process of this home is owner David Brearley and architect Craig Nasso. During their presentation, if you have questions, please enter them into the Q&A field.
Yeah, this is David Brearley. Thanks for having us on the Cool House tour. I'm a solar professional. I moved to Austin in 2005, and I've attended a lot of Cool House tours. Sometimes as in the professional capacity of kind of representing the solar installer. Sometimes just as an interested party, and so it's really it's an honor to have our little back house on this year's Cool House tour. And with me is Craig Nasso, who designed our back house. He's the architect of record and helped us pull the permits. And Craig's neighbor, and a neighbor both here in East Austin, but also on Rainey Street, right?
That's right. Dave and Molly had come to my place on Rainey Street and seen my little back house that I built for myself, and I used back then for my office and my home. And there was some. And they liked the feel of the place and how useful it was, and so I was delighted that they selected me to help them with their project, and it's been an honor to work with them on it.
Okay, if we can go to the next slide. I just want to do a setup so that you can kind of see where we are in the world, and we're 6 blocks east of the convention center, just south of the Texas State Cemetery. Easy access to the hike and bike trail. And this map is by my wife, Molly O'Halloran, who went to school as an architect and now makes maps. But Molly's not presenting today, but she was a real big part of the planning of this of our alley flat. Next slide, please. So as was the case with the presentation right before lunch, I think it's interesting to start kind of at the front of the property, because these accessory dwelling units are kind of support these back houses. The front, it's historic homes kind of on the front of the property, and like many of the historic homes in our neighborhood, it's a 100-year-old house, relatively small, 1,000 square feet, and other than the unfortunate kind of brick facade, it's still relatively well maintained on the inside, kind of in its original condition. And so next slide, please. Why don't you talk about this, Craig?
Yes, here, we decided to, when they came to me, wanted to build a back house, and a couple of things that are really, important to them was that how they really lived a lot in their backyard, and they had at the time they had chickens, and they had a beautiful vegetable garden, and so we wanted to try to maintain as much of the open space of the backyard as possible, and so part of that is some of the things that we did on the first floor by leaving the back end of the garage open, and then also the northwest corner of the property where you can kind of see all the way back to the back fence line, and then leaving a large area in the middle for for gardening and use as a yard. Yeah,
can we go to the next slide? You can kind of see how we left the garage open. We left sort of this covered patio zone open, and as you'll see, so we're going to start off kind of looking at the parts of the back house that we as kind of owners are using, and it's primarily my access. So right now we're in that volume kind of on the bottom first floor with the 2 kind of windows in the stucco facade. That's where Craig and I are sitting now. That's my little 100 square foot home office. And I access that kind of through the cantilevered, the covered porch. So if we go to the next slide, you can kind of see how kind of half of the downstairs volume kind of supports the front house, and the other half is really kind of dedicated to the back apartment, which is where we host friends and family, as well as short-term rental guests. Want to talk about the flow at all here?
Just that it the flow for Dave and Molly basically comes from the main house to the back house, and so the entrance to the office is on the right there, and then the flow for the guests typically come off the alley, and they enter it usually if they're from out of town, they're coming by a car and they need a place to park their car, and then they go up the stairs to the apartment upstairs.
Okay, next slide, please. So this is the covered patio zone, just outside my office. And if we go next slide, you can kind of see the office itself. The plywood wall cladding is sort of a detail that I just carry through from the storage room, which we'll kind of go to next. And it was just a way for me to like be able to hang stuff wherever, kind of whenever I wanted, without necessarily needing to find a stud. Like typically I'm still looking for a stud, but if a stud isn't where I need it to carry some load, that's 3/4 inch plywood on all the walls. So, and it's all like outfitted pretty rough and ready from the Texas State Surplus Store. Next slide, please. So, and you can see here, so this is kind of going from my office into the storage room. Second picture is from sort of the carport back into the storage room. And if you go to the next slide, you can see that that's one of two custom-made barn doors, sliding barn doors that we're using. Just to throughout the back house, you'll see we're using barn doors and pocket doors to minimize kind of like just losing space to kind of swinging doors.
And the nice thing about the barn door on this location allows when Dave's working on a project, he can kind of slide the door open and pull his tools out into the carport or use the carport for a covered work area.
Yeah.
It seems like every time I come over here, he's always has some new little woodworking project that he's doing in the house. And so that really works well for that.
Yeah, and it's an extra wide door. So, it's a lot easier to manage an extra wide door opening with a sliding barn door. So one of the things I wanted to talk about here is there's kind of a theme throughout the house. If we go back, please. Yeah, is you'll see that there's a lot of salvage wood here. This is all antique longleaf pine. I've kind of incorporated into all the soffits kind of downstairs, and that door cladding, and also kind of the door trim details for the garage door and the door into the storage unit. That's all salvage pine that came out of 100-year-old homes that were being pushed over basically to make way for progress. But for me, it was really important to keep some of that high quality material out of the landfill and be able to showcase it kind of here in our little back house. And it kind of carries through some of the look and feel from our front house. So next slide, please. Want to talk about the alley?
Yeah, this is the alley view of the house, and there's a couple of neat things about it. And one is that it does have an appealing presence on the alley, so that it makes it welcoming for the guests that are staying upstairs to enter. We also the majority of the service parts of the building, which is the electrical service and the solar inverter, and then also the mini split condenser is all located back here in this area, which makes it easy for somebody to service if needed, but also just kind of keeps it out of the yard area of the interior. And then you also notice is that the ground level of the structure is stucco, and then the upper parts is a hardy board siding. And so having those two distinctly different allows the house to look like basically an elevated cottage, and which is really similar to a lot of the smaller homes that are in the neighborhood. And
next slide, please. So this is the stair approach to the guest suite. So next slide, please. Yeah, and Craig will talk about the flow up here, or the program up here.
Yeah, so ADUs are allowed a maximum of 550 square feet, and so that can be a challenge to make it really work well. And so what a couple of things that we did was to really maximize the circulation, so that when people are in their home or in the home, that there's this you experience the house in a couple different ways. And the doorways that lead to the screen porch, you can get there from either the kitchen in the morning with a cup of coffee, or from the living room, and maybe evening with sitting on the screen porch and its views towards downtown. And then in the living room itself. It has a roomy feel because the space expands in basically all directions. There's a little bay window off the dining table. It expands into the kitchen, into the porch, and then it's also a vaulted ceiling. And then also the circulation through the bedroom and through the bath with pocket doors that just basically hide away into the wall, allow somebody to flow through the bathroom back through the entry as well. And then the other thing that's important to note here is we put the washer and dryer kind of outside the building envelope, which we'll get to in a little bit more later.
Yeah, if we can go to the next slide. So this is sort of, I guess what's interesting is the downstairs is very kind of utilitarian feeling, to be quite honest, and some of that's intentional. But when you come to the top of the stairs, like there's this kind of jewel box, and part of what happened here is like a series of kind of lucky, happy accidents where Molly found a 3.5 foot by 8 foot door made out of antique longleaf pine with these really nice kind of frosted kind of windows, and you can see by the stars kind of in the corners of the paint, the glazing, that's a door that came out of the Texas State Capitol that we found in somebody's garage. It was on Craigslist. And then the wall material and the floor material was like a remnant palette of wood that I kind of was able to pick up like for dimes on the dollar, and then kind of use here. Like it was not, they were all short pieces of wood, and it was a mixed palette of woods, and it would have been difficult to use in a lot of commercial settings, but this is such a small little landing at the top of the stairs that it kind of just worked perfectly. And so next picture, please. And even though this is a tiny little back house, it has sort of a foyer, which like our 1,000 square foot front house doesn't have. And it also, there's something interesting here in this foyer that kind of compresses everything. Before you go to the next slide, please. And Craig was talking here about the kind of this great room that has the vaulted ceiling. It has a built-in seating for a breakfast or workstation, and yeah, why don't you talk about.
And then it also has a built-in shelving, which allows for books and beautiful things that add to the character of the room, and so just it's another element within the room that makes it feel like just a little bit bigger.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting. Sorry to interrupt, Craig, but this is it's always interesting to me that like the back house is small and it's intentionally sort of feels smaller. We tried to keep it scaled down from the back house or from the front house, but this is the biggest room on the property. It's bigger than any single room in the front house. And yeah, so we can go next slide. And this is looking at both ends of that kind of living room, that multi-purpose.
And this is the little dining bay that you kind of experience when you walk into the house. And there's 2 bays on the upstairs, which really are helpful because in a couple of ways. One is they make the space feel a little bit bigger, but without making the whole room bigger, because we were right on the line in terms of 549 square feet, and we needed just a couple of more feet, and for the dining area, so you can kind of walk past it into the living, and then we also needed a couple more feet in the bedroom area, but also those bays correspond to elements on the first floor, which is windows above the office and the garage.
Yep. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So yeah, and here you're looking from the kind of living room into the bedroom, and you can kind of see like the living room, is primarily a couch, TV, kind of a little dining zone, and then, but it's pretty luxurious when you think of it as like a guest suite, because it's a full, so if you go to the next slide, you'll see it's the bedroom is completely separate from the living room. Next slide, please. And we, because it's a small space, we were able to do some interesting things. Like we had a friend build a custom-made bed to this space, which it's a standard queen size bed in a manner of speaking, but it's designed for a compact footprint, and you can even see the offset kind of leg on the bottom, so it's not a toe banger. And then where we have this bump out, I kind of did a treatment using the salvaged longleaf pine. It kind of created a headboard of sorts, an accent wall behind the bed. So next slide, please. Want to talk about anything here, Craig?
Well, you can see how effective those pocket doors are in a small space, because the doors are nice and wide open, but the door is not hanging out in the room somewhere, or blocking a portion of the wall, or in this case it would be blocking the map, or just hanging out in the bathroom area. So it just makes the room allow you to kind of see into the other rooms without a door there, and just makes it feel like each room, you feel like it's like there's a little annex to each room.
Yep. Yeah, and it's worth mentioning that all of these interior doorways are 8 feet tall, so they're extra high. The ceilings are 9 feet tall. So again, like, it's a small space, but it reads a little bit bigger. Next slide, please. And the bathroom it's interesting because it's a little bit more interior. It's a little bit of a darker place, just kind of by design. There is an exterior window, but it's a window out over the stairway. So it's but I think what's sort of interesting here is that we're using a bunch of the salvage wood here. We're using it kind of behind kind of as a backsplash at the vanity, as sort of an accent wall. We're using it across the ceiling, and in part because that beadboard, we didn't have a lot of beadboard, so it was about the only place I could use it. But the beadboard does a really good job of disguising the attic ladder hatch in there. And if you go to the next slide, you can see that we have friends donated some remnants of tile that came out of a public art installation. That public art installation is at the district chiller kind of cooling station, kind of just north of the convention center. And when we finished tiling that shower surround, we had exactly 5 tiles left over. We essentially had the remnants of the remnants of the remnants of the tile, off of that project. And what was kind of interesting about that is that, again, it was kind of like this found material, donated from some friends of ours, Stan and Martha Pipkin, but it kind of pushed us out of kind of our comfort zone. And it's one of the more interesting moments in the back house, in my opinion. Next slide, please. And you can kind of see here, the other thing that it's kind of worth mentioning is that you can see there are a lot of built-ins, and the built-ins for the most part were in the original plans. We just kind of knew that if we did built-ins, we could get a little bit more space. It would just things would read a little bit bigger.
One of the interesting things as we're looking through these slides, and I keep looking at, is like, because you can see into the other rooms, and there's just the natural light in this space is just really good, because it's like there's always, depending on what time of day it is, there's always some light that's coming into the home, and in all these photographs is that there's no interior lights on, because it's a really nice space with just all the filtered light that's coming through.
Yeah, and so one of the things that we did do, and this was maybe not part of the original plan, but we were able to sneak like a sun tunnel in from the kind of that brings light in off of the roof into the bathroom. Normally, you would put that on the south face of the roof. In our case, we put it on the north face of the roof because you'll see later there's solar on the south face. So next slide, please. Yeah, and this is another strategy for bringing light into the room, right? Want to talk?
Yeah. This was the screen porch, and so during the, I think you mentioned like shoulder months, and at the time of the year when it's like you can kind of live with your doors open. This makes it a really pleasant space where you can just put the doors open, and then and enjoy that additional porch area as part of the living space, or be out onto the porch. And then from this porch, the porch is on the northwest corner of the house, so it has views towards downtown, and which also makes it an interesting place to be in.
Okay, next slide. And I think what's sort of interesting, this is just a little setup, is that porch is actually bigger than our kitchen. So Craig found a way to make a kitchen work in 64 square feet.
Yeah, it was just the basic layout is a galley style kitchen, which is the most efficient way you can I think lay a kitchen out, because you don't have any lost space in corner cabinets, or and then we also went to smaller appliances with a smaller size dishwasher, smaller size refrigerator, smaller stove, and a single basin sink, which is really all you need with the dishwasher. And then also there's there's 2 windows in the room, so you have light coming from two different sides of the building, and then there's also access to the screen porch,
Yeah.
which makes it feel like you just just walk out there, in the morning to check the weather, and so just, but it's and the open shelves really makes it feel more open as well, and since it's used primarily as a short-term rental, it just has the basic things that you need for staying there for a few days.
Okay, next slide. And I think one of the things we did here is, this is another place where we're reusing salvage wood. This is in this case I painted the shiplap for use in the walls, and it's, again, because it's a small space, like I could kind of take material that you just can't go, it's labor intensive to salvage, but it's like a place where we could just kind of use it for maximal impact. Next slide, please. And so this is sort of exiting, we're sort of heading back out of the apartment. And one thing I should mention is that these floors, those are nice maple floors, but they're salvaged. They were originally a gym floor, and so they're reinstalled here and then refinished. So next slide, please. Want to talk about the built-ins?
Just it allows for a little additional storage for how do you use it, for bedding, or?
We use it, yeah. So we tuck in like all of our toilet paper, extra towels, a lot of the things that we need to kind of operate that guest suite.
And then one of the craftsmen that worked on the house, Aldo, he built, I believe, is the table. No.
Aldo helped me build the table also. Yep.
And so which is kind of a nice artistic element as you walk into the house, and it's from like a live slab of wood,
live edge piece of pecan. So it's a native wood, and and so we built 2 tables specifically for this back house, and the bed. There's just not a lot of furniture back there, in part because there's so many built-ins, and so we kind of were building things to fit the spaces. So next slide, please. And here again, we're kind of, this garage, or this sliding barn door is kind of built to the space, clad with the same material as used on the wall. Because they were short pieces of flooring, you can see how we kind of had to vary the pattern. Like we couldn't run them like horizontally across that door opening. So we just changed the pattern. It's kind of cool. It's got a good look, but we're hiding like an ultra efficient kind of washer dryer back behind there.
And the nice thing about the washer and dryer being outside of the air conditioned building envelope is that you don't have the moisture from the washer or the heat from the dryer when it's operating.
Yep.
Or the noise.
Yep. Yeah. Next slide. Next slide, please. So here you can see 4 kilowatts of solar on the roof, and I may mention on the way in, I work in the solar industry, so I had some priorities for the solar array. We made sure that all the vents are kind of running to the north side of the roof. We specified a true standing seam metal roof that allows us to mechanically connect the solar array to the standing seam. So the only roof penetration is a single conduit that kind of collects all the electrical off of the roof. And then that conduit kind of runs inside the framing all the way down to the inverter at grade level. And you'll notice even at the inverter, there's no exposed conduit anywhere. That was kind of really important to me. Next slide, please. And so this is again that utility corner where kind of just all the kind of business is happening with the service, the mechanical system. But that's a tankless on-demand hot water system, ultra high efficiency. And it's also an ultra high efficiency kind of 2-zone mini split system. It's ducted upstairs, and then there's a separate cassette kind of down in the office, but they share the same outdoor condenser. Next slide, please. Okay, and this is just real quickly to kind of show you like how we worked. Next slide, please. So you can kind of see the top left is actually a picture from the inside of our front house. We have a lot of kind of the antique longleaf pine exposed. And so I was kind of going into these old homes in the neighborhood and salvaging material, refinishing it before those homes got demolished. So next slide, please. And you kind of see like originally this was kind of a 1x12 They had wallpaper on top of it, and got repurposed into a bathroom vanity. Next slide, please. Here I had salvaged some 2x4s out of a ceiling, and I knew that there were no nails. It was clean material, so we were able to kind of rip it down and kind of make a slat table that serves the back house. Next slide, please. And some of our friends like Aldo, Sean, some of the folks I know I've essentially worked in the building trades my entire adult life, and a lot of our friends and neighbors are in the trades. So we used a bunch of them on the back house. Next slide, please. And then Molly and I did just really kind of a ton of work. So you can kind of see us kind of working here. And yeah, next slide. Want to talk about the alley?
Yeah, and this is an exterior view of the house from the alley, and one of the beautiful things about ADUs on the back of the alley is that I feel like they do make the alley a safer place, because there's some eyes on the alley, which that makes it safer for people to walk and use the alley, but it also, the more the little houses on the alley, creates more pride in the alleys, and each individual homeowner starts taking a little bit better care of that along that fence line. And then this is also a good view of the roof line of the house, which was something we really considered because it is a taller structure on the back of the lot. We wanted to make sure that the roof line was softened by doing this like hip gabled technique, and then it also allowed us to have a large shed area facing south for the solar array.
Yep. Yeah, and that hybrid kind of roof also allowed us to justify the array to the right to avoid some shading. We're like moving the array sort of to the east to avoid shading in the afternoon from a neighbor's street. So, and that's the end of our tour.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, guys. What a wonderful presentation. It was just super informative. And I got to say, at the 549 square feet, the place really does read large, as you said, with the high ceilings and all the natural light and the beautiful wood. And I will say, though, I think the really sort of shining star of this property is all this salvaged wood that you've been using and you deployed in this beautiful property. So it's exciting to see all of the visual elements. We have a few questions here. Let me start with this. David, can you tell us more about the metering process for accessory dwellings and share any tips you learned along the way?
Yeah, and it is sort of the unique thing about this is unique to Austin. So the Austin billing system will accommodate 2 electrical meters per property. So you could have 1 electrical meter for a front house, 1 electrical meter for a back house, 1 electrical meter for a front house, 1 electrical meter for a solar, but you cannot have 1 electrical meter for all 3 of those things. So in our case, we started off thinking we'd have the back house separately metered from the front house. We wound up keeping all of the front house, back house behind 1 electrical meter and have a separate electrical meter for the solar. That also ensures that when the solar on the back house is generating more electricity than the back house is using, that excess supports the front house. We're not, there's sort of some economics to why you want that to be that way. The other thing is sort of interesting with an ADU, any kind of new construction you're doing solar, it can kind of complicate the site inspection and qualification process. I think City of Austin may have expedited some of those procedures where they just kind of leave it up to the contractor to verify that the system is like a qualifying location.
Okay, great. Thank you for addressing those points. Let me ask you a question here because I think it might be on the minds of many of the viewers. How difficult or expensive is it to salvage wood? Is it necessary to have someone hired, especially like a special company, to do that?
I don't know how. I think if you're hiring somebody if you're going out to buy salvaged wood, it's expensive. It's an interesting thing. So the people that can have like a nice longleaf pine are either very poor because they're living in an old longleaf pine house, or they're very rich and kind of afford it. And we're kind of like straddling those 2 worlds. Like we couldn't afford to go out and buy it. We couldn't afford to pay a contractor to do that work for us. So we were just doing it ourselves. And one of the things that's worth mentioning is that, like in one house, we just had a connection. We could go in, and the contractor was like, "Look, this thing's going to get pushed over on Saturday. So you got 48 hours, 72 hours to get as much wood out as you can. Another house was much more sort of professionally operated, where the contractor was like, sure, you can go in and harvest as much wood as you want, but you need to show $1 million general liability insurance policy. So I was able to work with a friend of mine who had that kind of insurance policy, and then he got all sweaty and dusty with me to salvage the wood. But yeah, so I mean, that sweat equity is a key way that we were able to kind of have nice things without paying and control the budget.
Yeah, that's amazing. And the Craigslist, using the Craigslist and those beautiful Italian glass tiles, it's wonderful.
Right. And also, I mean, other people are doing what we're doing. Craig, I mean, we saw Craig doing this kind of salvage operation like before we ever did it. So, you know.
Yeah, you can, if some of it's timing too, is paying attention to the houses in your neighborhood that are kind of moving in that direction towards demolition, and tracking down who owns it, or even looking up the demo permit, and then you basically you can do it with basic tools, just pry bars and hammers, and maybe a electric sawzall, and then just then you need a truck or trailer to haul it, but it's just that's really the best way to get it.
Or a 2004 Toyota Matrix. I can also carry some 16 footers.
Wonderful. And it sounds like you have to kind of be a bit of a hound dog to go and find all this, but it seems like it really paid off. We have 30 seconds to answer this next question. I know it's on the minds of many out there. So let me ask you. So when you market this ADU on Airbnb, do your building's green credentials help generate more traffic?
I'd say it's kind of bit buried. People don't see it, in part because we're an Airbnb superhost, which means that they essentially crafted the listing. We used to talk about it more when we had full control over how that Airbnb profile lives. But once you're a superhost, you sort of lose some of that control. So it's invisible to the guests, as is the sound of the mini split. Like, there's a lot of benefits to being in that space, of it being energy efficient, that people don't know it, but they experience it's an improved way to live.
Well, and I really appreciate the way that the property does fit in seamlessly in the neighborhood as well. The look and feel of it, it's not disruptive at all. It fits in beautifully, and it's a wonderful energy efficient home. So we want to thank you, David, and thank you, Craig, for joining us today and sharing more about this interesting project.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
We'd like to thank our sponsors. We've got Nassau Architecture, East Austin Nest, Freedom Solar Power, Lighthouse Solar, and Elite Heating and Air Conditioning. One thing we do want to do before we bring on the next presentation is we've got a few more people who have chimed in on having attended 10 or more Cool House Tour events, and we'd like to give them a little bit of recognition. And so we have Rebecca Richter, more than 10, she says. We've got Lucy Stolenberg with way more than 10, she says. And then we have Kelly Mahan as well. So thank you guys so much for your support and being a part of the Cool House Tour. All right, our second tour of this afternoon is of a suburban hillside nest in Leander. Let's watch the video.
In a northern suburb of Austin, this property's owners found a lot perfect for their new sustainable home. The location presented an initial challenge because it was situated on a hillside adjacent to a ravine. However, with some careful design and planning, the homeowners were able to create their dream home. The home's two-story design uses efficient cooling strategies, including deep overhangs, a metal roof raised above the roof deck, and a staircase to maximize natural airflow and ventilation. A sloping roof allowed the architect to include high recessed windows to provide natural daylight without overheating the residence during the hotter months. Efficient appliances and equipment include LED lighting, a variable refrigerant heat pump for heating and cooling, and a tankless gas water heater to help the homeowners save on utility bills. With the desire to safely age in place, the homeowners created an accessible bedroom and bathroom combination on the ground floor, with a wheelchair-ready bathroom that includes a roll-in shower and roll-under cabinets. The couple enjoys outdoor living with an inviting front porch and a second screened-in porch that takes advantage of the prevailing breezes, creating a pleasant space where they can relax throughout the year. The homeowners' desire to nestle into the Texas landscape and enjoy their natural surroundings on a challenging lot inspired their goal of building an environmentally responsible home using high-performance building strategies. They stepped up to the challenge, creating a practical, livable, and sustainable home by maximizing both indoor and outdoor spaces, while ensuring their access to spectacular Central Texas views. This thoughtful planning will bring them enjoyment for many years to come.
Joining us today to present more about the design of this project are architects Alan Barley, Peter Pfeiffer, and project manager Joel Efland at Barley Pfeiffer Architecture. After their presentation, we'll take audience questions. Please enter all of your questions in the Q&A field.
Hi, good afternoon. I am Peter Pfeiffer. This is Alan Barley, and our project manager, Joel Efland, is here. This was an interesting project because of it's the second time we did this home for the client, or did a home for a client couple, and they learned lessons from the first one we did about 15 years ago, and then we got to refine those lessons on this one. Even though they're an older couple, they still wanted their master suite upstairs, which helped us keep the footprint nicely stacked. So by design, there was a bit of an energy savings right there because we didn't have a spread out first floor and a small second floor. You'll see the screen porch on the left, which is not typically where we would have put it because it's on the southwest corner of the house, but there's a stream there and the breezes come up from that ravine very nicely. So it was just calling out to be the outdoor place.
Slide, please. So you can see there's many elements of high performance design in this house. We try to really fit these things into the landscape very well, but also we have views, which is one of the reasons why this client bought this piece of property. But at the same time, they wanted to be responsible. They were concerned about indoor air quality. They were very concerned about natural ventilation and daylighting. And since this is the second house and they moved in from living an hour and a half away from Austin to be closer more to the medical facilities, aging in place, this is their final house. It's all of the access requirements are present here. And by stacking the house as much as we could, we can lower the cost of ownership for these people, but and with all the other environmental responsive items on it, it helps lower the cost of operating and increase the durability of the house.
And let me zoom in on something that what Alan said. The reason why a two-story house is less expensive to own and operate is because you have less roof area facing towards the sun, accepting the solar heat that then you have to figure out a way to get rid of. Plus, you have less of a perimeter around the base of the house that lets air infiltration and bugs come in if you don't seal it really well. But there is also a guest suite downstairs in case one of them gets infirmed and can't go up the stairs. But in their view, no, the heck with it. The more they go up the stairs, the longer they live, they believed. Next slide. Next slide. The site planning was kind of neat. As I said before, if you look at the solar diagram or where the sun rises and sets and where north is up in this case. So the house primarily is along an east-west axis by site planning purposefully so that the majority of the windows face either north or south. And that's pretty important.
And the physical exposure of the house is east and south, and we minimize the exposure to the west.
We design, you'll see, and this is important for when you're planning, we show the builder and everyone else where the solar panels are supposed to go. Those are those two darker rectangles you see on the roof. We've learned our lesson there because if you don't show that, A plumber might run one of his plumbing vents up through there, or the AC guy might run his furnace vent through the area that you planned on putting solar panels. So that's really important to do. Next slide. You'll see the porch on the left, which is to absorb those prevailing breezes, come up then through the kitchen and up the stairs and out the stair tower windows at the top. So we create a siphoning effect going through the house, not just cross ventilation, but a siphoning effect. And then you'll also notice from an indoor air quality perspective, we separated the garage and the workshop from the house. So the air that's the somewhat not good air that's in a garage due to off-gassing from your car or your lawnmower or leaf blower or paints or whatever doesn't migrate into the house. That was important to them. Their health was critically important, as was, as Alan said, daylighting. Al, do you see anything on this you want?
Well, I think two things to note is the front door faces the approach from up the long drive from the street side. And we also wanted to take advantage of the ravine to the left. So hence the screen and porch, which we typically don't like on the western side, but there is a high hillside just across the ravine. So it shields the screen and porch from the west, and we get to really take advantage of that natural feature, which was one of the primary reasons why the client bought this piece of property.
But if you look at it, it's a pretty simple rectangle with just in the front porch turn at an angle and the screen porch turn on an angle. So it's a very efficient home to build. Let's go on to the next slide. There you see the upstairs of the master suite on the left and a guest suite on the right. What's a key point from a green building perspective is that if you look carefully, the mechanical equipment's more or less in the center of the house, those closets off the hallway. That's really important. So you minimize the length of your air conditioning system's duct runs because it's already in the middle of its zone. And same with the water heating. You minimize your plumbing because we put the water heater real close to the master bathroom and just above the kitchen, the 2 points usually of first need for a water heater. So by design, we made for a more efficient plumbing system, and by design, a more efficient air conditioning system.
Two other things to note here is that the laundry is placed at the point of use on the second floor, just down the hall from the master bedroom and walk-in closet. And then the master bedroom has windows on both north and south, which is really going to facilitate the ability to naturally vent this room at night throughout a lot of the year.
Yeah, they grew up in the time when people opened windows, as a lot of us did, but they really do like sleeping with the windows open, which was one of the reasons why also they wanted the master suite upstairs. You can go to sleep with the windows open and still feel secure. Next slide. We talked about the east-west orientation. Why don't we, you notice the roof is quite a big slope facing south, so that it would make for a fantastic solar collection device. We pre-wired the house, as we do with all of ours, for solar. I don't believe they've installed the solar yet.
One other thing to notice on this house, and this is a good photograph, is there are overhangs over all the windows, which we feel like building overhangs and awnings, which building in Central Texas are almost essential to protect the house from direct sunlight, but also to protect the house from the weather and the rain and sheet flowing down the roofs.
Now it also makes for nice, better daylighting in the house, believe it or not. Somewhat counterintuitive. If you take the radiation or the hot sun off of the pane of the glass, then you don't have to close the blinds inside the house because you don't have any direct solar radiation coming in. So you actually have more windows with unobstructed views and unobstructed access to daylighting outside because you dealt with the issue on the outside of the house than the inside of the house. Now I'm going to point out something in this slide because some of you are probably saying, yeah, what do you guys do this for? You'll notice the dark metal siding and the lighter colored roof, of course, makes sense, but we had a heck of a time getting this neighborhood association and the developer to accept something other than earth tones because of the era that this was what's it called, Crystal Falls. When it was developed, they were very much into earth tones. So we originally wanted the house to be a lighter exterior galvalume metal, but they wouldn't allow it. Next slide. Joel had fun here, our project manager. Joel's behind us. We developed a new detail for the awnings to be hung from above instead of brackets going down below. Anything else in there, Joel?
Well, it's important to note that typically we like to put our garages on the west side of the home to use that program to shade the rest of the house. But in this case, with the hill on the west side, we weren't so worried about the western exposure. And they also had a neighbor to the east that was actually fairly close to the property line. So they really wanted to use the garage as more of a privacy buffer than an energy saving.
Good point. Next slide. Here you see the screened-in porch from the outside. Now there is something interesting about the screened-in porch here. A lesson we learned. We love doing screened-in porches. It's just my favorite room in almost all of our homes, but they do get dusty. So what these folks did is right from the start, if you look carefully above the screens of these metal boxes, they have the exterior shades that come down that block the air from blowing in during the spring or times when you're not using it, so you don't get this much dust and pollen building up inside the porch.
Next slide.
This is the living room with the screened-in porch to the left. Oh, we should compliment the interior designer, Joel. What was the name of them?
Taylor Klaus of Love County Design.
Taylor did a great job working with us on this. Next slide. This is an interesting picture. This is from the back of the house. You see we're standing up on that bluff, but the reason why we want to put this picture in the group of pictures for you is to show you that roof it's a roof system I developed on my own house about 20 years ago that essentially makes it so that the metal roof is floating above the subroof with air channels, continuous air channels. It dramatically reduces the amount of heat that penetrates the building because of this. And the reason why the lathing is shown running at angles is so we didn't have to have 2 layers of lathing crisscrossing. We just had one that can go from rib to rib on the roof, but at the same time provide air channels. There's some details about how we separate all the wood pieces so there's a continuous flow of air from the overhangs up to the ridge. It reduces the heat flow into the attic much more so than a previous product we developed, which was called Tech Shield Radiant Barrier. This is the type of stuff I really get into, and you can tell, but let's go. Next slide.
I think we talked about overhangs. Again, we strive to put overhangs over all of our windows or awnings for protection, for sun control. And you can see how these are doing a great job at this time of this one. This photo was shot here protecting some of these windows. They just add to the life of the house. And when you run the energy analysis, they add to the energy efficiency of the home. Next slide.
Many years ago, I was attracted to come to the University of Texas because of a professor, Paco Arumi, who was developing the first means of using computers to analyze how houses actually use energy. And then through Mac Holder, my former employer, we developed that into a very useful design tool. And we can actually show our clients, gee, if we do have this glass that goes a little bit further down to the ground, it's going to add a half a ton to your air conditioning needs. So we can really tweak the window pattern, the awnings, and with the air conditioning system and make sure we've optimized the house.
And we do use old style, old school solar angle calculators
yes.
by Libby Owens Ford. And I'd also like to comment on the neat design here of the awnings. Joel, that was something you did. Why don't you say something real quick about that?
Well, so we were trying to adapt our more standard detail for that inverted awning over the garage door. And so this was just another iteration to get the 2 different types of awnings to relate to each other.
Next slide. Well, yeah, I think it says it all on the in the verbiage.
I think the big thing is when you have a long face facing north, load it up with windows, take advantage of that free reflected light to bounce it into the house in many different ways. And in this case here is a good example of how the light colored metal roof and the white soffits can help reflect and bounce light into the clear story windows, pushing it into the house further, increasing the daylighting.
Yeah, we actually used that big cut in the limestone bluff behind us to be as a big reflector of daylight into the house. Next slide. Well, I think the point about this is, my gosh, and this is one of the great things about that energy run that I learned to do through Mac Holder's office. It really helps us closely size the air conditioning equipment to the actual load. I presume at this point that many of the listeners understand how an oversized air conditioner isn't good for you because it doesn't provide good humidity control. So we're very fastidious about making sure the air conditioner is not oversized and works a lot, so it really dehumidifies the house well because it runs longer. Next slide.
And lower first cost too of installation because you're actually putting in a smaller unit.
Right.
Absolutely.
So here, the closet I was pointing out in the floor plan on the second floor, where the air handler for the second floor is right there, more or less in the center of its zone. So it just has two large trunk ducts going out left and right, which are not very long because it's in the center. It's not like you're putting the air conditioner over in the garage and running a big duct all the way down the length of the house to a master suite and wondering why you don't get good airflow. No, by design, we put the AC where it needed to be, and same with the water heater. And actually, before you say it, I want to do a shout out to this plumber. That was one of the cleanest plumbing installations you'd ever seen. Christian Vences was the plumber, and I liked it so much I contacted him to tell him, hey, that's a great plumbing job you did on this house. A young man who's just a really fastidious plumber.
But do notice how all the needed items for a mechanical closet, from being able to flush out the lines to having access to cutoffs, they're all in a place that are easily accessible by the client. When they're easily accessible, the client's going to maintain them. When they're far away or they're hard to get to, people have a tendency just to forget about them.
Good point, Al. And you'll also notice another thing that we're pretty careful about is making sure the mechanical equipment room or closet gets painted with a nice enamel paint before you install all the material. So it's easier to keep it clean. And there is a drain built into that. So if something fails, the water doesn't go through the ceiling below, but it actually goes out a drain. And the last thing about this slide is notice the filter system underneath the air handler. It's about 8 inches tall. It's a MERV 16 filter, really important, but it's big. So it really filters out everything, but doesn't reduce the airflow too much.
Speaking of drains, and you can move on to the next slide, over all the wet areas, wherever there's a sink or a toilet or a faucet, under in the slab, under those items, we have a floor drain. And it's a very bulletproof way that if a leak develops inside a cabinet or behind a wall, there's a fail-safe way to take that water out before you discover it 2 weeks later and have a lot of damage being done.
Now let's talk just briefly on this picture about the generator, because that somewhat plays into a discussion about solar systems. And there are people who think, well, I want to do a solar system and put a bunch of Tesla batteries up in the garage, and then I've got my protection for a power outage. Well, if you do the numbers, that you might get about 4 to 8 hours of stored energy, and then you're in the cold, so to speak. And that's that's one of the lessons we really learned during the freeze this February. As much as we love solar systems, and guys, we do, they are not a substitute for some type of emergency source of power. In this case, a small natural gas fired generator. Next slide. Well, I'll say one thing. First of all, I want you to look at the kitchen, and there's something about this that makes it very green that you may not catch, and that is the countertops. Notice how light the countertops are. The lighter the countertop, the easier it is for you to see that onion or that carrot that you're dicing. And believe it or not, by having a light colored horizontal reflective surface and lights that are close to the task, you see the light hanging through the opening above the kitchen, The closer the light is to the task and the lighter the background is around the task, the less light you need for your brain to understand what it's supposed to be doing. Just doing that can reduce the air conditioning load on a house like this by 1/2 ton.
And I spoke earlier about reflected light. Just look at the shadows cast by the cabinet in the window and the underside of the light shelf, how it's brighter than everything else on the wall. That's just a good indication of how you can use these light colored surfaces in the house to help brighten up the interiors without necessarily resorting to additional lighting.
Next slide. Joel, do you see? Well, actually, yeah, here you see the pendant lights hanging down above the island to get light closer to the surface.
And the stair tower is located opposite from where the breezes hit the house. So it's on the northern side of the house. And whereas in the foreground is the south face. So we can open those windows at the right times in the year and create a thermal siphon and have enhanced ventilation through the house and also vent out warmer heat.
But there was something else in this slide that's kind of good now that I see, which is you see the windows on the stairs facing north and you see how much light is reflecting into the house from them. And we oftentimes like to have the stairs and the kitchen be somewhat near each other. So that light that's coming down from the stairwell gets to flood into the kitchen, which is where you're going to use the most amount of energy in your house. So the more lighting you can get from Mother Nature, the less lighting you have to, or the less electricity you have to use.
And the stair coming down where it is right now for the owner, they're coming down from their master suite and going directly into the main areas that they live in day to day.
Next slide. I think you see the operable windows up at the top of the stairs so we can vent out the house. Next slide. Clear story windows you see up in the right there that bring in a lot of reflected light into this upstairs hall area.
And also down the stairwell too.
Yes. Next slide. This was sort of neat, even though, and what we really try to be careful with is it's a lot of glass facing to the outside, but it's under a broad cover. So you don't have to worry about solar radiation or glare. It's nice reflected light coming through. Sunlight may well be reflecting off the front porch floor and then the ceiling and penetrating into the house.
Next slide.
Next slide. Yeah. We talked about this, but this is the garage on the right. No, the garage on the left and the house on the right. Doesn't matter. The point is they're separated. So we don't have any of the bad air from the garage migrating into the house. Next slide. Spray foam insulation is, just so wonderful for keeping humidity out and reducing air infiltration. We really take pains to wrap the house in a good weather barrier, a commercial grade building wrap. We don't believe in just taping the pieces of plywood together and call that a wrap. We also really promote the sealed attic perspective. We have a ventilated roof system on this house with a sealed attic, which is the best of both worlds.
Consistent practices on all the houses that we do and test it by having our clients, after we design with an energy analysis to tweak the performance of the house, then they send us their utility bills, their electric bills for the first year. And then we go back and test the real world results with the theoretical energy analysis.
Usually we're within about 10%, 5 to 10% accurate. Next slide. Oh, Joel, what do you think here? It's just.
Yeah, so as requested by the client, the primary master suite is upstairs, which is kind of unusual for an age-in-place situation. But as we discussed with the client, they really believed in the health benefits of navigating those stairs daily, just to keep them more active.
We had a cardiologist client say to us many years ago that his healthiest patients are those who have to go up and down stairs often every day. Next slide. You'll notice something here with the bathroom. First of all, aside from a kitchen, a bathroom is another place where we use a tremendous amount of energy, primarily associated with lighting. And let me just stop there for a second. The reason why you hear us concentrating so much on the way we address daylighting and lighting is that Next to air conditioning, your second biggest consumer of energy in a typical custom home isn't the heating, isn't the water heating, but it's the lighting system. And that's why you see we do so many light colored reflecting surfaces and try to harvest outside daylight as much as possible.
And as we get older, which of course Peter and I here,
Alan might be, but I'm not.
but aging in place doesn't only include physical access, but it's hard. It's harder to see as you get older. Your eyes start not taking in as much light. So this constant
Attention to lighting
attention
and
to
daylighting.
light and daylighting helps a client see better as they get older.
But notice also the grab bars at the toilet and the grab bars in the shower. What the heck? We don't have the same balance we had when we were 35 years old. Go ahead and build the house with the grab bars now. You
Next
can use
slide.
them to hang your washcloth if nothing else.
Next slide, please.
Yeah, you see the grab bars around the bench there in the shower.
This is a first floor guest suite, which can act as a second master in the future if the owners ever get to where they can't negotiate stairs. And here we do have really full handicapped access roll-in showers and roll-up vanities done in more conventional ways. Next slide, please.
We have not installed the rainwater collection system in this house yet, but it's set up with the guttering and the downspout to bring most of the roof water to a central collection area if you want. These clients had a rainwater collection system running their previous house, which was located out in the hill country in Bertram. And they're very familiar that we just hadn't gotten around to doing it yet when we were building this house. But they were wonderful people to work with, and it was just so much fun having some clients who had been in one of our houses. What was it, 15 years ago we designed it, and we were able to sit down and very bluntly talk about the things that worked and the things that didn't work so well. So how often do you get to do that, where you get to tweak it and do another
Try and do
design?
a better job at it. Next slide, please.
I think that's it, is it? Oh, the water filtration system. That's one thing they did get spoiled about because of the rainwater system they had in the previous house. So we have a really good water filtration system out there in the workshop that services the house. Charcoal canisters to take all the chemistry out of the water, all the chlorine and all the other things. And then an ultraviolet filter on the right to really disinfect the water. So this is a really high grade of water in this house, better than what you buy in the store. Joel, anything to add to that?
Yeah, so this water softener system is actually a saltless system. And that was one of the lessons the clients learned with their previous house. They installed a salt-based system earlier in their previous house, and were really disappointed with the harmful ecological effects of that really salty discharge from the system.
Salting the earth.
So this time around, they really wanted to make sure they didn't have that issue.
I think we're through the slides now.
And would be welcome any questions you might have. So let's use the
Yes.
we have to do that.
Oh, this is wonderful. What a thorough presentation. I want to thank you all so much. It's just very clear to see the expertise and experience to your green building strategy that you have brought in this property. And we want to thank you for sharing that with us today. And I think it really speaks to all the things that you've done working with the landscape, working with the orientation. There's a lot of discussion around light on this property, the energy, sustainability, energy efficiency, and then everything is really built towards aging in place and giving the clients what they want, really providing this beautiful sustainable home that this couple can enjoy for many years to come. So what we'd like to do now is we'd like to go ahead and jump into the Q&A from the audience since we're a little short on time, and I'm going to do that right now. So the first question that we have here is, do UV rays still enter the home with the glazed low E windows?
Yes, UV still comes into a home with low E windows. Low E windows are like sunglasses maybe, and the awning is sort of like wearing a big broad-brimmed hat. Awnings keep 100% of the solar energy out of the house. Low E glass keeps about 40%, about 40% out of the house. So you still have about a 60% solar heat gain.
Okay, great, thank you.
And actually, Amy, if I can say, a lot of my colleagues seem to think low E glass is a substitute for good passive solar design, and it's just not. There's no substitute for a good solar controlled design.
Okay, great. That's wonderful to know, and you know your stuff, so we appreciate that.
Thank you.
I will say this was so interesting to me too, just in talking about aging in place and the little things like that reflective countertop, the reflective light countertop, and thinking about chopping onions and stuff. I love that. And there was a question from the audience that said, "What is that countertop material?" I think everyone would like to know.
So that's a manufactured stone, a quartz material, either silestone or Caesar stone. Not entirely sure what the finished selection was.
But we do like using that material because you can get a very, very consistent white surface, and it's also a much denser surface than some of the natural stones, which means there's less food particles that can get down into the grain of the surface, keeping it cleaner.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I want to say it's not all white. It's just a light colored reflecting surface. You don't have to just do all white.
Yeah, it comes in different colors.
Okay, great. Let's see, next question here. What is the metal barrier versus chemicals?
Say that question.
What is the metal barrier versus chemicals?
Okay, yeah, we use Termimesh. Termimesh is an interesting system that came to the United States from Australia many years ago, and we tried it out for the first house in America. Was a house we did in Long Canyon about 25 years ago. And the idea behind it is it's a stainless steel mesh that keeps bugs and termites out of the house instead of having to rely on pre-treat the soil underneath the house with chemicals before we poured the slab. And then we realized that's terrible for indoor air quality purposes and for the environment. So it's a real permanent integrated pest management.
It's a physical barrier that sits between all the penetrations from that go through a slab.
And around the perimeter.
Around the perimeter.
Okay, thank you.
Instead of a chemical barrier.
Okay, let's go to another question. What type of energy modeling do you use?
It was developed by Mac Holder, L.M. Holder III Architects. Mac's still practicing in town out on Spicewood Springs Road. It was based on, well, it was originally based on a program that we were all developing at the University of Texas in the late 70s, early 80s. But now it's based on an Excel spreadsheet, so it's pretty easy to manipulate. It's proprietary. I mean, we have a license to use it from Mac Holder. And Mac Holder was the one who developed it. I worked with him in the development of it, but it was his brainchild. And it's a great program because it gets to the essence of what we need for our climate, which is it will show you how much the solar radiation control can have direct effects on heating up of the house and air conditioning. Very few of the other programs out there can quantify your window design with your air conditioning problem.
Okay,
Go
well,
ahead.
guys, we have
Next
about
question.
we have about 25 seconds left, so I'm going in my brain, which one should I ask? I think I'm just going to ask quickly. What is the return on the cost of investment for this couple? Like, when will that happen for them?
Typically, everything we recommend to a couple or for our clients is about a 2 to 3 year payback. I know there are those who would like to see who could be tolerant of a 7 or 15 year payback, but yeah, we've got it down to the point that we don't have to put the expensive stuff in the house. We just have to design it to respond to the climate, and that's relatively inexpensive. It's green by design.
Green by design first, and then you add the systems in after.
Very thoughtful. Thank you
help?
so much. Thank you so much.
All right, guys.
We are going to wrap up this presentation. I want to get to the sponsor slide. And just want to thank you guys for the beautiful presentation.
And a shout out to Neil English, the builder, did a fantastic job, English Partners. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
Our pleasure. And I'm getting to my slide for the sponsors. If we could pop that back up, that would be fantastic. Barley, Pfeiffer Architecture, English Partners, Texas Sun and Shade, and Two Hills Studio. All righty. Well, thank you, everyone. This has been so interesting and informative. I really appreciate the variety that we have on the Cool House Tour today. It is our 25th anniversary, so thank you for joining. And we have another property to share with you today. It's our last feature. So next on the tour is an affordable, environmentally conscious multifamily community in North Austin that is earning a 3-star rating from Austin Energy Green Building. Let's watch the video.
Foundation Communities has provided affordable living and free community support services to help Texas families succeed since 1990. Their most recent project, Waterloo Terrace, includes 132 studio apartments that were designed to maximize energy and water efficiency, making life more affordable for the single adults who will call this community home. The community's structure, around a large terrace courtyard, features balconies, raised beds for vegetable gardens, and shaded spaces for outdoor grilling and socializing. Light-colored paving helps to reduce trapped heat, and wide overhangs shade the windows, reducing the impacts of Austin's hot summer climates on residents and keeping cooling bills to a minimum. Inside the apartments and common areas, durable finishes, LED lighting, Energy Star appliances, and efficient HVAC systems combined with low-flow plumbing fixtures keep maintenance, energy, and water bills low. A 177 kilowatt solar array scheduled for installation in the summer of 2021 will supply enough energy for 80% of the complex's total needs. This spring, Waterloo Terrace welcomed its first residents to their new 3-star Austin Energy Green Building rated homes. Foundation Communities' mission prioritizes resident well-being, offering a range of supportive services, on-site bike storage, and the use of healthy construction materials makes this community a safe, affordable, and sustainable place for Austinites to call home.
Beautiful video. It was so wonderful to see this. And now joining us today to discuss affordable multi-housing is Anna Lake Smith with Foundation Communities and John Hagar with Forgecraft Architecture and Design. Afterward, we will open it up for your questions, so please be sure to get those in the Q&A field.
Okay, thanks Amy for the introduction. I'm Anna Lake Smith. I'm the Development Project Manager for Foundation Communities. And with me today is John Hagar, Principal and Partner at Forgecraft Architecture and Design. We're really excited to be here today to introduce y'all to Waterloo Terrace. Next slide, please. Foundation Communities is an Austin-based nonprofit founded in 1990. Our mission is to create housing where individuals and families succeed. Our housing plus services model empowers low-income residents and neighbors with the tools and support they need to stabilize and increase their economic standing. In Austin, we have 26 properties, including 2 in development and 3 under construction. We have over 6,500 residents between our family communities and our studios for single adults. We also have 2 non-residential properties called Prosper Centers. This is where we offer financial coaching and economic education. We assist underserved students through our College Hub program, and we help enroll clients in health insurance under the Affordable Care Act. Annually, we serve more than 35,000 low and moderate income clients. We partnered on Waterloo Terrace with Forgecraft because of their commitment to our mission and their deep understanding of how important good design is in the creation of meaningful, impactful communities. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Anna. At Forgecraft, we've made a strong investment in both affordable housing and sustainable design as part of our own mission. So we really value this partnership with you. Waterloo Terrace represents our 3rd project with Foundation Communities after Capitol Studios and Bluebonnet Studios. And we've since gone on to do 2 more. Zilker Studios, a 110-unit affordability unlocked project on South Lamar that just started construction, and Parker Apartments, a 135-unit affordability unlocked project, this one for families, which is also in South Austin and currently in design. All of us at Forgecraft are so proud of the work that we'll be looking at today and are grateful to the folks at Austin Energy for allowing us to show it off.
So Waterloo Terrace is our 7th supportive housing property. And as John mentioned, we'll be opening Zilker Studios, number 8, at the end of this year. As a supportive housing project, we not only provide homes for our residents, but we have an array of services available to help them succeed. Often these properties house folks living with chronic health problems or disabilities, people who have been homeless, and those living on fixed incomes. All of the units at Waterloo Terrace are available to individuals with an annual income of 50% of the area median income and below. So that's about $35,000 and less. Our on-site services include 24-hour staffing, a healthy food pantry, adult education classes, counseling, and medical support, including a registered nurse. Next slide, please.
Waterloo Terrace is located off of North Mopac, which would trace the right side of your screen on this slide. The Walnut Creek Greenbelt runs past the western boundary of the property on your left. So we oriented our building as close to the Greenbelt as the existing site topography would allow. The last 40 or 50 feet there slopes pretty steeply. We also organized the program around a central courtyard. And this did two things for us. First, it created a much needed buffer from the highway. Highway traffic produces a lot of sound and air pollution. And indoor air quality is a major concern in our work. Placing the parking lot between the road and the building really helps to mitigate those effects. Next slide, please. Second, it allowed us to maximize the visual connection to the Greenbelt. We looked for as many opportunities as we could to find views both from the courtyard as well as from the open air walkways serving the units. This connection to nature is a guiding principle behind our design. Foundation Community's design director, Megan Matthews, always challenged us to let our design tell a story about the building. And I think the story for this building is how it interacts with its environment. And I think it's a pretty compelling story. Next slide, please.
Thanks. So we'd like to walk through our 3 key design priorities before we dive into the actual green features of the project. So first and foremost, resident health and indoor air quality. Healthy air is particularly important to us as our supportive housing residents often have a high occurrence of respiratory issues. And we know that the average adult spends more than 90% of their time indoors. As such, we choose our finished materials carefully, looking for durability, affordability, and health and eco-conscious materials. It was also important to us to have large operable windows to give folks as much of a connection to the outside as possible. On past projects, humidity has been a challenge for us now that we're making buildings so tight and we still need to meet the fresh air requirement. So after multiple charrettes with our team, we landed on a combination of a 1-to-1 PTAC, which you can see in this photo under the window, and centralized energy recovery ventilators, which bring in conditioned outside air directly to each unit. The final design strikes a really nice balance between user friendliness, efficiency, and cost. Next slide, please.
Here you can see one of the 4 dedicated outdoor air units located on the roof. This outdoor air system is always on, and it supplies the units with preconditioned and filtered fresh air, courtesy of that ERB. Because a lot of the heavy lifting, both from a fresh air and a humidity control standpoint, is done passively, the HVAC system in this building is much more predictable from an energy usage and overall performance standpoint. The residents really don't even have to think about it, and Foundation Communities, as building owners, can be confident that Waterloo Terrace will perform long-term just as they expect it to. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, we organized the program around a central courtyard, which is really the heart of the whole project. An open air communicating stair, which you can see here with the yellow fins, is located at the entry to the courtyard and adjacent to the main gathering space, the common laundry facilities, and the resident mailboxes. This stair is an example of what we like to call active design, and it encourages residents to walk up to their homes instead of taking the elevator. Next slide, please. Active design is also represented in the circulation through our courtyard. Our site slopes about a full story from one side of the courtyard to the other. And because accessibility is always such an important consideration for us, and especially for this community, we used a long winding ADA ramp to carve out smaller programmatic elements like you see here, and to ensure equitable access for all residents to all spaces. There are 3 generous rain gardens in the courtyard that receive rainwater from the roof, delivered via these vertical blue elements you see lining the walkways. The courtyard was actually originally designed around a large, beautiful heritage live oak, which would have been just to the right of the photographer for this photo. Unfortunately, we learned during design that it was in very poor health and it had to be removed. As sad as that was, we felt the courtyard had a lot of promise and we kept moving forward with that design anyway. And we like to think that the spirit of that live oak still remains in both the new trees and the other plantings throughout the courtyard. Next slide, please. The courtyard is also the social center of the building, as it gives residents space to hang out, either alone or in groups, and it offers views to the units around the perimeter. There's a strong connection to the courtyard from the units themselves as well. By cantilevering the portion of each walkway outside the unit doors, we've created a front balcony, or balcony, which acts as a front stoop of sorts. It gives residents an opportunity to personalize the entry to their homes. As you can see, someone has done here with some plants and a couple little pigs, and offers a comfortable, intimate space for enjoying the courtyard. Privacy panels, both at the bottom of the guardrail and at the vertical panels on each side, allow residents generous views of the spaces below without making them feel as though they're on display. Small details like this can go a long way in helping residents feel comfortable and safe. And this is especially true when some of Waterloo's residents haven't had a safe or a stable living situation for a while. Next slide, please. A small window at each entry door, where we've located a built-in desk and writing surface, further strengthens that connection. Residents can feel connected to the courtyard space from inside their homes while they're reading or checking their email. And users of the courtyard can see the lights on through the windows at night, which further adds to that sense of life and that sense of community. It's nice to be able to see your neighbors, you know? Next slide, please.
So in addition to the courtyard, which as John mentioned is really the social hub of the property, our resident amenities are oriented around the perimeter of the courtyard, which helps bridge the gap between staff and residents. Our common areas include a fitness center, a dog run, and a community kitchen and gathering room, which you see here, which is where we'll be able to host supper clubs and holiday parties in the future. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's get into our green features now that we've talked about our design priorities that we held for the project as a whole. So let's talk about the specific choices that we made to make the building itself greener, more sustainable, and healthier for our residents. Next slide, please.
Okay, to make an energy efficient, affordable housing project, it's helpful to use conventional building systems and then pay really close attention to the details. On Waterloo Terrace, we use 2x6 exterior walls with R19 cavity insulation and R6 insulating sheathing. The TPO roof has the highest solar reflectance index available and is installed over R30 continuous board insulation. These design choices gave us a building envelope that exceeds the baseline requirements of the energy code. From there, we used advanced framing techniques such as ladder blocking and California corners, and worked closely with our envelope consultant, our green building consultant, and the general contractor to develop really strong air sealing details. Energy efficient windows and LED lighting throughout also make major contributions towards overall building performance. Now, I know that can all sound a little dry, but basically what it means is that by making a series of small but deliberate decisions, we ended up with a building that performs about 25% better than code during peak demand. Next slide, please. All of the plantings in the courtyard and in the rain gardens are native and drought tolerant. Unfortunately, they are not snowpocalypse tolerant. This photo was taken shortly after our recent winter storm, and these poor plants had not yet recovered. They will soon though, and I think they probably are in the process of recovering right now. And soon the courtyard will be the rich and beautiful environment that we envisioned. These rain gardens are all next to a program space in the courtyard, and they play a really important role in telling that ecological story that I mentioned earlier. Next slide, please. All of our plumbing fixtures in this project are ultra low flow. We work closely with our product manufacturers and representatives to find the best performing and most durable fixtures that the project can afford. This drop-in shower here is one example shown in one of our accessible units, complete with foldable shower seat, grab bars, and accessible shower wand. We have a number of fixtures like this that we keep coming back to for each project because we know that they perform and we know that they last. It helps to save a lot of guesswork and wasted time during the design process. You wouldn't think that a fiberglass shower is something an architect would get excited about, but you'd be wrong. Next slide, please. As I mentioned before, we use conventional building materials in conjunction with carefully considered details to create a high performance building envelope. We designed interior spaces with durable materials, including ceramic tile floors in all the units. Additionally, we worked with a general contractor to manage waste during the construction process. For this to work well, the whole team needs to be on board from the outset. Next slide, please.
We're really proud of the way that we've integrated accessibility into this project. And as John alluded to earlier, we're very intentional about not making accessibility feel like an afterthought. For example, the primary path to get to this meeting room, which is at the back of the property from the building entry, is via the ramp through the courtyard. 13 of our units are fully mobility accessible, and 3 of those have additional hearing and visual accessibility features. The remaining 119 units can be easily transformed into accessible units if needed. This kind of flexibility is critical for us because we don't know who the residents will be until lease up. At Waterloo, 3 of the first 10 residents are wheelchair users. It also helps to promote equity in the community because all of the units are more or less the same. Next slide, please. Resident education is an important factor in ensuring that the building performs as we expect it to. Our internal sustainability team puts together information on ways to conserve water and energy, recycling, and how to DIY green cleaning solutions. They also offer training for all of our property management staff. In a recent survey of our residents, about 83% said that they live a greener lifestyle after living with FC. Next slide, please. Okay, so to foundation communities, resilience is really about longevity. We're lifetime owners and we have yet to sell any of our communities. We want to build buildings that hold up as long as we intend to own them. And we also want to build places that residents want to live and feel safe living there. At our supportive housing communities, we cover the full cost of all utilities on site. So anything we can do to reduce money spent on utilities means money that we can put towards services and amenities for our residents. The solar array that you see in this photo covers about 80% of our energy usage. Next slide, please. We're constantly asking ourselves how we can create a community that both feels like home and empowers residents to have agency in their space and in their lives. Elements like this vegetable garden help engage residents in the community outside of their individual units and is a beautiful metaphor for why we do the work we do. In just the few weeks since this photo was taken, this garden is flourishing, and my hope is that our new residents are too. Next slide, please. Waterloo Terrace is our third project together as a team, both foundation communities and Forgecraft, but also many of our consultants as well. Our team knows the things that are important to us as the owner, and we're not spending valuable time getting everyone on board with the mission. When we start a new project, we're already ready to roll up our sleeves and make targeted decisions about how to spend the budget, both from a user standpoint and building performance. We also leverage invaluable feedback from our staff. We have regular meetings during design with our staff to work through adjacencies, systems decisions, and material selections. A lot of the work that we do is calculated trial and error, and we're fortunate that we get to be our own guinea pig. And as our contractor likes to say, we'd rather make new mistakes on each project. We firmly believe in the principle of building sustainably, but we also build green because it's the smartest thing for us to do in the long run. By investing in our buildings, we are investing in our communities. We're very grateful to get to be here today to show off that it is possible to build both affordably and sustainably. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this presentation. We just also from Austin Energy want to give a big shout out to Foundation Communities for everything that you are doing for the community. This project is a great example of bringing equitable, accessible affordability to environmental health and wellness. So kudos to you. And we will dive into a couple of questions here. So Anna, Foundation Communities has built many affordable housing communities. Each one is unique. Did you have lessons learned specifically on this project that will inform future projects? And you were kind of leading into that on your last statement. If you can expand a little bit more, that would be great.
Yeah, I think there's maybe 2 or 3 things that we really took from Waterloo into our next project, Zilker Studios, which, like we mentioned, is under construction now. So I think the first thing we did is we turned the building inward, and we were able to make sure that the green space is the heart of the project. Zilker's on a very tight urban site, and so that had to be a priority from the get-go if we were going to make it happen. I think we've also integrated accessibility really well. I think that has been an important thread throughout the projects that we do. And then I think the third thing is something that we've been working on as a portfolio as a whole is our HVAC strategy. Waterloo Terrace was our first project outside of a hotel conversion using PTAX. And so we're really excited that so far, all of the humidity data that we've been able to collect from Waterloo, which is just about 100% occupied now, is showing us that we're on the right track with this strategy. So we're really excited to test it at Zilker and have sort of more data that we can move forward with. So I think those are sort of the big things that we've taken forward.
And that's, yeah, and I love to hear that because, data doesn't lie. So you're really able to almost pilot that process a little bit. And
I'd
I
like
would
to
love
add too, if you don't mind, that we took a lot from our previous projects and brought it into Waterloo Terrace. And I think the best example is the idea of the balconies, or those front balconies. We engaged Foundation Community's resident board committee for resident feedback during the design process. I think Peter mentioned it during the last presentation, having that opportunity to have kind of blunt conversations about what you did well and maybe what you didn't do as well is so valuable. And one of the things that they told us was that at Bluebonnet Studios, which is on South Lamar, there's a resident who, because the walkway in front of his unit just happens to widen a bit right there, has created this incredible garden with potted plants. And you can see it from the street if you're heading southbound on South Lamar. It faces a side street, not Lamar, but it's gorgeous. And they said, we'd love to have those kinds of opportunities for everyone to make that kind of like personal expression of their own space. And so we took that input and we decided to kind of bake it in as a basic amenity for all of our residents at Waterloo Terrace. And that's where the whole idea for the balcony comes. We're having your own space, kind of your own front stoop to say, that home there, that one's mine. So really useful feedback.
I love that. And that really is the definition of providing human-centered design for people, is really utilizing their feedback. And it's collaborative, which I think is so fantastic. And it's going to give you, longevity and give people, the opportunity to have, again, that access to environmental health and wellness. And I like, John, what you had talked about in the presentation about the residents being able to interact with the environment and how that was a really big priority as well. So it's not just an apartment complex for affordability, but it's about, experience and lifestyle with green features. So really appreciate that. The next question, John and Anna, can you share more about the differences in designing communities for single adults versus families from both the architect and the owner's perspectives?
Yeah, I can maybe take that one first. I think that, let me start by saying I think they're more different than they are alike. I think we're looking at similar sort of materials, and we're looking at similar finishes. Everything still has to be just as durable, just as affordable. But from a site strategy perspective, they are totally opposite. Our SRO properties, or our single resident occupancy properties, do sort of what I was saying before about turning inwards, and it's more about creating that internal community. Whereas our family properties are a little bit more about interfacing with the actual neighborhood. So our family properties have a learning center, and that's where our kids go to their after school programs. We do adult resident education, or adult just community education. And so there's a lot more engagement between the neighborhood and our properties. So those properties are a bit more about turning outward. So architecturally, they're totally different.
Yeah, and to add to that just a little bit, I think another thing that's more of a focus in the SRO properties than it is in the family properties is in the SRO properties, we're really trying to combat the sense of isolation that someone might feel by living alone. And so taking those pains to find ways to connect with your neighbors in a way that feels safe and comfortable to you, and really strengthen those connections and strengthen that idea of communities is really important in the SROs. And of course, that's important as well in a family property, but you're living with your family, so that the isolation isn't as big a concern. The only other thing is in the SRO properties, you don't really have to worry about whether or not you're building anything climbable. But on the family properties, you do have to be mindful of that, of how easy it might be to scale one of your walls.
Well, we've learned that kids will climb anything and everything.
They want to explore, those inquisitive minds. That's wonderful. And it's great to hear that, there is just this focus on community building. Let's go to some of the audience questions. I think we have some time for that. Okay, what is the life expectancy of the solar panels?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I think we intend to have them on the building as long as we have the building, but I don't know about the specific technology.
Yeah, one of the things that I heard you say is that, you guys are thinking about this in your design early, so you're not going to have to retrofit something, and it really is about longevity, long-term cost savings. So hopefully with cost savings from the solar power that will contribute to that. And I think, really the answer is also around the technology that is evolving. All of this technology is evolving every day. So thank you for that question. Let's see what else we have here. Can you say more about the rain gardens, choice of plants, and need for underground drainage in case a really large rain event or water diversion to avoid flooding?
Yeah, so the rain gardens and the courtyard space overall, from a design standpoint, was definitely the most complex part of the whole process. That took the most coordination by far. And so the rain gardens are what we call a stacked design. And I'm not a civil engineer, so I can't speak to this in a lot of detail. But essentially, they take the water quality component of the rain garden, and they take the stormwater detention capacity, and they stack it vertically. So in the photo, you may have noticed that the planting medium for the rain gardens was well below the height of the wall. And that's because that stormwater detention capacity is stacked on top of that. Additionally, the rain gardens kind of step down the courtyard as the site slopes, and each is connected to the other through a drainage system. And then those are piped underground and out to the main stormwater system at the street. So yes, there's a lot of pain taken to make sure that those are going to function and not create a flooding event in the courtyard.
Okay, thank you. And along the water topic, is the water sub-metered or allocated for residents?
So we cover all of the utilities for our residents. So our residents are not seeing a monthly water bill, but we are sub-metering. We sub-meter cold water, and that way we can track usage, we can catch any leaks. And we do have, I think we've got about 8 to 10 years of data throughout our portfolio. And so every month we collect that data from Waterloo, and it goes right into our massive data repository, and our sustainability team is crunching those numbers all the time.
I bet. Okay. Let's see. Are there elevators in these units for people with mobility issues?
There are. We have 2 elevators in the project. One that's located near that feature communicating stair that we looked at about midway through the presentation. And then another one that's a little further down in the courtyard. The building actually steps a full story about halfway down the courtyard. And so we do have 2 elevators. That redundancy is really important, especially with this community. But we try, I wouldn't say that we hide them, but we try to make that feature stair more attractive from the user experience, so that people are at least encouraged to take the stair instead of the elevator if they're able.
Yeah, I'll also add that I think y'all Forgecraft did a great job of making the architecture do a lot of the wayfinding for the project. I think you're right that path through the courtyard is intended to be the primary sort of way of getting around. But we also, like the elevators and the stair cords are all bright yellow. So anywhere you are in the project, you can really easily orient where you are and how to get to where you want to go. So I think that works really well.
Okay. A couple of other questions here. Okay, this is going to be for you, Anna. Is there a wait list, and how are the units allocated for this type of property?
Yeah, great question. The short answer is it's very complicated, and that is outside of my purview. The longer answer is yes, we do have a wait list. I believe when we started leasing at the end of December, we had a wait list, or an interested list, of over 800 people, and it's 132 units. So we know that the need is there. As I understand it, so we had a partnership with Echo on this project, and so they've helped us fill some of these units. But as I understand it, there was a lottery to invite folks to apply. And then once they get selected by the lottery, then they go through the application and sort of screening process.
And where best should people go to get on that waiting list? Should they just go to the website and you want to tell us that exact address, please?
Yeah, it's foundcom.org. Oh, foundcom.org.
Okay, wonderful. Let's see, another question here. How long does a typical resident live in an SRO unit?
That's a good question. I don't know the actual amount of time. Sort of internally, we assume multiple years. I think we generally have residents who move in with us and want to stay. And we don't have a whole lot of folks leaving our properties. So I don't know the actual number, but the sort of generic answer is a while, many years.
Okay. A couple of more questions here. John, what do you think are the most important design features or materials and system choices that make this a comfortable, energy efficient apartment complex? I know you said a little bit about your design features in the presentation. Can you expand on that a bit?
Yeah, I think in terms of energy efficiency, and especially also in terms of air quality, I think that dedicated outdoor air system, we knew early on, because this project is located on a highway, and because a lot of the SRO residents have, call it, complex medical and health histories, we knew that managing that pollution was going to be incredibly important. And so we decided as a team, and not just Forgecraft and Foundation Communities, but also our engineers, the general contractors on board, that system had to be a priority. And so that making a decision like that for what is a very substantial line item in the budget kind of helps to organize some of your other priorities. So from an architectural design standpoint, then we know that we've got to make beautiful things happen with very affordable materials. So, we've got hardy siding covering almost the entire building, with a little bit of stucco, say, at the entry. So we know that that's what we're working with from the outset, and so we have to just make something really beautiful happen with that. So there aren't a lot of I would say material choices from an architectural design standpoint that are contributing directly to energy efficiency, but we made those choices understanding that the budget priority in some respects was dealing with the humidity control and the indoor air quality. Aside from that, the courtyard also has kind of a similar relationship to the overall budget. We knew that space had to be really special, and because of the slope on the site, we knew that we were going to have a lot of earthwork, a lot of retaining walls. We knew there was going to be a lot of cost involved in that courtyard, and we knew that it's something that we couldn't pull from the project. So that was another priority that kind of set the design parameters for us on the rest of the building.
Okay, wonderful. Well, one of the things that really stands out to me about this property and Foundation Communities properties in general is just bringing down those barriers to access to this type of living. One of the things that you've done that is really exciting is you have deployed electric vehicle charging at several of your locations. And I know that the vision there is to really one day expand the entire profile of the properties. And, at working at Austin Energy with a focus on electric vehicles, we know that access to that technology is around providing upward mobility for people. So can you just give a little bit of commentary on why it's important to Foundation Communities to look at transportation and incorporate that into this health and wellness around environmental?
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. Transportation is a huge component of housing. And we don't know going into a project what percentage of our residents are going to have a car or be bus users or have an electric vehicle. So I think we want to be forward thinking in that we know electric vehicles are coming and that will be sort of the direction that we're going. But in the interest of not retrofitting, like that's a fairly simple add for us, like we can put in an EV charger without too much trouble. And so we're happy to do it knowing that's where things are going. We do also have, we're really working on a strong relationship with Cap Metro. We do offer our residents vouchers for public transportation if they need it. So like Waterloo Terrace does not have a bus stop that's particularly close to it. So we worked with Cap Metro to get a Metro access stop added within easy walking distance of Waterloo. So the sort of whole transportation picture is important for us.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And I know there's also the connectivity with Metro Bike, which is the bike share system of Austin, the electric bike share system of Austin. So it's really great to see these technologies coming together to elevate the human experience. I think we have time for at least one more question. Let me see here. Just a moment. What are the best strategies for making sustainable construction also affordable if grant support and owner sweat equity are not options?
Sure, I can kind of tackle that maybe in two different ways. We have sort of taken a step back over the last few years to reframe the way that we think about sustainable building and what that means to us. I think, some of the buildings that we built maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago are closer to state of the art and have some fancier technology, but we found that those really don't serve us in the way that we expected them to. Some of our highest rating buildings are not our best performing. And so for us, we really needed to step back and consider sort of how the pieces of the puzzle actually fit together. And so for us, user relatability was like very, very important. And so, our PTACs are easy for residents to use, easy for our maintenance techs to service. And so that is going to get us a better performing building. So I think I'll maybe stress that refocusing what sustainability means to us has been really important. In terms of funding, we know that green building is important to us going in, and so we build it into the budget from day one. It does help us get extra money sometimes. Like there are funders and grants that are geared towards sustainability, and so that definitely helps us. But we're also not building expensive amenities. We don't have pools, we don't have expansive fitness centers. And so we're able to channel the funds into the things that we really do care about. And like John was saying, that courtyard, yes, was expensive, but is absolutely integral to the project, as we talked about. So I think it's a multi-pronged approach.
And I think from a design standpoint, and I alluded to this during the presentation, you don't have in the budget room for for sort of really big, bold architectural moves or really premium, expensive cladding. So you've got to again use really kind of conventional systems, and then just really get the details right. And you've got to put a lot of creative energy. You've got to bring your passion to it, just to make sure that not only you as a designer, but also that your engineers and that the contractors sort of understand that intent and that everybody's on board from the get-go, so that when it comes time to actually build the thing, it goes smoothly and there are as few say change orders as possible, adding extra costs to the owner.
Well,
I'll add that our contractor, sorry, if I can just add that our contractor did an incredible job to bring this project in under budget, which for us, considerably under budget, which for us meant that we were able to recycle those funds into another of our projects that had a bigger funding gap. So there is sort of a cycle of this too. If we can tighten up this project, then it allows us to continue building. So it's not
very much energy efficient, budget efficient, and a lot of passion. So we want to thank you so much. We're out of time, and we really appreciate everything that you've done, as I've said before, and we loved hearing more about this inspiring housing community. So thank you so much. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Foundation Communities, Forge Craft Architecture and Design, and BEC Austin. Well, now that you've seen all of the homes and heard from our terrific panelists, let's take one last poll. Here we go. What do you plan to do with the information from the Cool House tour? Use what I've learned in an upcoming project or purchase? Get more information on ratings or green features from Austin Energy Green Building? Get more information on rebates and incentives from Austin Energy? Reach out to the participating builders or architects about my project, or do nothing, just here to see some cool houses. So this has been a great day. I have learned so much, and I'm thinking about how to go home and implement some of these energy efficiencies in my own home. I'm wondering what you guys are thinking as well. I hope that this presentation is going to inspire you and was also helpful in building your knowledge about the strategies of green building. Do we have the results from the poll? Okay, here we go. The number one answer to the poll of what you're going to do with the Cool House Tour information is use what I've learned in an upcoming project or purchase. Perfect. That's wonderful. Glad to hear it. I want to thank you all for participating today in our 25th edition of the Cool House Tour. We want to thank our underwriters, Austin Energy, CED Green Tech, Sunrun, HE Solar, Cam Solar, the Power Store, and Solar Syntex, whose generous contributions support the mission of Texas Solar Energy Society. And thank you all to the home sponsors and panelists for their contributions towards this goal as well, especially all of the time you invested to prepare and share these stories with us today, as well as the creation of these sustainable buildings that are woven into the fabric of our community. We encourage everyone to learn more about how to create healthier, energy efficient, resource-wise homes. Remember to check out the resources and rebates that Austin Energy has for you at savings.austinenergy.com. We'll be sending out a short survey immediately following this event that will pop up on your browser window. Please consider taking a few moments to provide your comments. We value your feedback as it helps us plan future events. Look for our follow-up email next week with the event recording and extra resources, including a link to our Green by Design webinars in August. Thank you again for joining us for this 25th anniversary edition of the Cool House Tour.